The Earley Show will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
I've been utilizing Answering Legal for my firm since 2015, and truth be told, it was a game changer for me. I can be anywhere, and I'm getting my phones answered by Answering Legal. A strategic partner, as I call Answering Legal, provides a great reward. What is that reward? It's time. Time for whatever I want to do. As a private practitioner, I would highly recommend Answering Legal to other private practitioners. Now, every call goes answered.
Welcome back to the Earley Show, sponsored by our friends at Answering Legal. I'm your host, Chris Earley, a personal injury law firm owner of business codes for personal injury lawyers. And as you know, during each episode of the Earley Show, we feature a titan in the personal injury space. And today we have a real treat. We have my friend, Craig Goldenfarb. Craig is a personal injury attorney and entrepreneur in West Palm Beach. I've gotten to know him pretty well in the past couple of years. He was kind enough to come on the show. We're going to learn a lot from Craig, as we do all our guests. So I'm really pumped up to get into it with Craig. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you buy your ticket for his 7-Figure Attorney Summit happening in Boston in April. And we'll tell you more about that during our conversation. So as always, sharpen your pencils. There's going to be plenty of writer downers that you want to take notes of, because we're going to be hitting you with a lot of good content, I'm sure. So Craig, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And I like that you referred to me as a titan. Can I go back and use that with my wife and tell her I'm a titan?
You have permission. So we met at 7-Figure Summit in New York last year. You've been very generous. You've been very gracious in helping me. I know you're a giver, you're a helper, and I really appreciate that. So, thanks for all you've done to help me. And I try to help others, right? I think that things work well that way. We're all helping each other, and we're not just taking what we're giving. So I asked you to be on the show because we have a lot in common, right? We're both law firm business owners. We are scaling our practices. We handle PI. We both have a passion for business, right? I mean, I'm a self-professed geek at this stuff. I nerd out on this stuff. And I feel like you too. You are a tactician. You like to get into the weeds and really, grow, always optimize your practice. We also have this guy. We're both meditators. So I think that's pretty cool. I know meditation has changed my life, and I can't wait to talk about it with you and, what it's done for you. And most importantly, we're both girl dads. So that's why I wanted to have you on the show. I need some advice for the teenage years.
Yeah, I've repressed most of them, but I think I still have some memories that are floating around.
All right, Craig. I know your story, but I'd love the listeners that aren't familiar with it to hear. Could you just tell us about your upbringing, what it was like growing up, what it looked like? The floor is all yours.
Sure. I grew up in Florida, on the west coast of Florida, in a city called Clearwater. So I'm one of the few people in Florida who pronounces it correctly. It's not Florida. It's Florida with an O. So, Chris, that's your first demerit, is you pronounce it like all these Northerners, or should I say Northerners? It's Florida. So I grew up in Florida, and I had the unusual experience in the 1970s of having a mom who was a lawyer. And in the 1970s, there weren't too many female attorneys, much less in Florida. And my mom was pretty bright, and in fact was the first law professor at Harvard Law that was a female. And that was an honor to grow up with a really smart mom who was courageous and who really was a trailblazer for women's rights in Florida in the 1970s. So I grew up with a very strong role model as a mother. And I also realized that my brain was a little bit like my mom's, in that I was a tactician and I liked the law. And I used to follow her to work and watch her. And I got to watch her in the Florida Supreme Court argue when I was about 12. And that was really impactful to me. And I realized that I wanted to go into law because my mom was a special woman.
How about your dad? What did he do?
My dad was a caregiver, in that he was an oncologist. So he was a cancer doctor, also in the 1970s. And the cool part I find about my father is that in the 1970s, oncology did not exist yet. So he was board certified in med school to be a hematologist, which is the study of blood-borne diseases. And he moved to Florida because that's where all the old people were. And so they moved down from the Boston area. Both went to Harvard in the Boston area where you live, and moved to Florida because that's where old people were, and old people got cancer. And he realized that was the place to be. So they were two fish out of water over on the west coast of Florida in the 1970s. And my dad ended up being a successful oncologist in Florida. And for those of you old enough to remember the Cosby Show, I am Theo Huxtable, because Theo Huxtable's father was a doctor and his mother was a lawyer. Before Mr. Cosby got into a bit of trouble lately, he was his family was just like mine on the TV show. I am Theo Huxtable.
That was a great 80s show for sure. Grew up watching it. So two academic parents, right? Very learned individuals. What was it like at the dinner table? Oh, first of all, any brothers and sisters or no?
I have a sister who's a little older than me, and she also went to Harvard. So I am the self-appointed idiot in the family because I did not go to Harvard, and I merely went to Duke undergrad. So if you can imagine growing up in an intellectual family where you were the moron for going to Duke University. So I was the stupid kid.
So they worked, I presume they worked a lot when you were a kid, right? They were busy at work?
They did.
Okay. What were some of the biggest lessons that both your parents imparted to you?
Well, it's interesting. Sometimes you want to be like your parents, and sometimes you want to distinguish yourself from how your parents raised you. In my situation, my father was a really loving, caring man, but he worked too much, and he was a workaholic as an oncologist. And my mom was a tough cookie and had a really strong personality and was not particularly a caring woman. So it was interesting to me growing up that we had the reverse gender models in my household. My father was a softie, and my mom played the typical male role model in being the disciplinarian. So it was kind of interesting to grow up in a household like that because there was a lot of processing to do as a child as to, how you have opposite gender role models that are different than the rest of your friends and how to process that. So it took a while to realize that my challenging mother, we'll call her challenging, was playing the male role model as a mom. And they both worked, and they both worked too hard. So I struggled in my early years in figuring out what kind of father I wanted to be, what kind of husband I wanted to be. And what's interesting about my seminar that's going to be in April in Boston is my wife is going to be a speaker.
Awesome.
One of the topics that she's going to raise is work-life balance and what effect workaholism has on a family. And it's pretty rare to go to a seminar where you're going to hear that the lead speaker is a jerk. So my wife's going to get up there and talk about the effect of workaholism on a family, just to kind of bring it home a little bit. So you can hear some cautionary tales and also some advice on how to avoid ignoring your wife or your spouse and your kids.
Yeah, that's really important stuff. The most important stuff, frankly, right?
Right.
So, two highly intellectual parents. Did you feel pressure to do well in school? Was there that pressure, or were they not like that?
My mom was high pressure like that because I think it's part of your identity, Chris, is as a parent, as an adult. Where do you get your identity? Is it as a business person? Is it as a lawyer? Is it as a mother, father, brother, as a sibling, or as a child? And her identity was as a smart attorney, and she didn't put a lot of value in some of the other things in life. So it was challenging to me that more of the emphasis was put on intellect than on other people skills. Mm-hmm. And that taught me a lesson, which was that when I became a lawyer and a business person, I wanted to put the people skills first and become a good, nice human being first. And then I believed that the success would come. And that actually came true for me.
Well, that's wonderful. So a lot of times I feel like we take on a lot of traits of our parents, and we're also mindful not to do certain things that maybe are, or approach things our parents in a way that our parents approach things. So your mother was interesting in the 70s. So this podcast is all about PI entrepreneurs, right? Uber successful, you, John Morgan, Ali Awad, Jennifer Gore Cuthbert, Mike Morris to come on next week. Just people who have been punched in the face and they keep going. And we'll get into the resilience factor in a second. I would think your mom was incredibly resilient in the 70s because the legal space looked a lot different, right? There weren't as many females. And so she reached very high levels. Could you talk about her resilience and what you witnessed and how that shaped your resilience?
Sure. I mean, like I remember a story when I was a teenager and she came home crying. And I was probably too young to really process it. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but seeing your mom come home from work crying is pretty impactful no matter why it was. And I remember a repeated story when she'd come home crying, which is she said another judge told her to go home and have babies.
Wow.
So I didn't really know how to process that as a kid because I didn't understand prejudice or gender inequality as a 7-year-old or 10-year-old. So, but what I did watch is for her to have to fight back. And she had to defend herself. She had to excuse the fact that she was working even as a female, which is in and of itself in the 70s was not great if you're working as a female. And then the job she had as a criminal defense attorney, you're already starting off with a strike against you because you're, quote, defending criminals. Mm-hmm. So she had 2 uphill battles to climb. One is a female attorney, and the second is to be in a field of law where you're constantly under siege because you're defending alleged criminals. So I watched a very strong and resilient woman turn of age, and that was pretty impactful to me to learn some resiliency as well.
So your dad had a different approach, right? A little more hand-holding, if you will, right? So could you talk about his resilience? Because obviously he was super uber successful. Was he equally resilient, would you say, to your mother, or how would you describe his resilience?
Interesting. He was kind of passive. So the answer would probably be no. He didn't face that much adversity in his career other than the fact that he hated money. So he was an awful business person. Like many doctors, he went into medicine because he cared. And luckily for him, back then, the health insurance industry was not as evil. And he could still make an excellent living as an oncologist without having to do administrative Blue Cross Blue Shield appeals for his bills all day, which is what doctors have to do now. So he was in a lucky time period in the 70s where health insurance wasn't the titan, there's that word. Insurance companies were not as bad as they are now. So he didn't, at least in my opinion, his only battle was health insurance at the time, which ends up being a pussycat compared to what they are now.
He sounds like, tell me if I'm hearing you correctly, he was a very compassionate guy.
Amazing. It's funny because as adults now, we know the doctors spend 4 minutes with you, if you're lucky, 6 minutes with you. So my dad often told me when I was young, he said, I have the luxury of spending an hour with each patient because I'm making a living when they're back in the chemotherapy chair, back on the Barca lounger in the back of my office. So he could have 6 or 7 patients on a Barca lounger getting chemotherapy while he could spend an hour or more with each patient. And for someone who grew up like us, Chris, hearing that a doctor could spend an hour or more with each patient is something pretty special, especially if that patient is dying of cancer. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty cool to me to watch a compassionate father.
That is cool. And I think it's cool that he wasn't chasing money. He was chasing his passion of being compassionate, it sounds like.
That's all he cared about, was to be able to hold their hands and guide them through the toughest thing they were ever going to go through.
Yeah, that's important work. So, all right. So I just wanted to get a flavor on what it looked like growing up, what mom and dad were like, how they influenced you, right? And so you got out of law school. Could you tell us, you went to Duke undergrad?
I did.
How about law school?
I went to the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida, because I knew after college that I did want to practice back in the state I was raised in. I really liked growing up in Florida.
So you got out of law school. What was the path then? What'd you do?
Well, so I had the honor at law school of having a 2.9 GPA. Amazing. As you guys may recall from law school, it's all about the interviews and the stupid interview process where you're all fighting for interviews with firms that you wouldn't want to work for anyway because they're all sweatshops. So it's a really dysfunctional end of law school, at least when I went to law school. It's weird because you don't want to work for any of those awful firms that are coming on campus that we're all battling to get an interview with. Lucky for me, I got no interviews. 0. That's 0.9. Who's going to give that guy an interview? So due to the fact that I thought I was going to be working on my people skills in law school more than anything else, and that's what I did. So, of course, doing that, all I did was play soccer, because I'm a soccer player, and play basketball. So basically, I studied occasionally, and I just exercised and had fun. And I lived at an apartment complex in Gainesville, Florida, a single guy, right, law student. So I go to the car wash one day at the apartment complex. Every apartment complex, for 25 cents, you stick in the little quarter.
Yeah.
My time, now it's a credit card or your Apple Pay. And you get the vacuum and you get 10 minutes worth of like the air hose. So I pull up at the same time as this really cute blonde chick. And so I'm thinking, how can I hit on this girl? Obviously, I'm very, very focused at this time on my law school career. So I was just single. So I hit on her and we both pulled our car up at the same time. And of course, being a gentleman, we pulled up at the same time. There's only one hose. So I back up my car to be a gentleman, also because she was cute. And so she finishes her car, and she later tells me that she thought I was creepy because I pulled back my car. And in those days, we didn't have cell phones. So what can you do to look not creepy if you're just sitting in your car in 1994? Well, you can't. So you just look creepy. So I'm sitting watching her wash her car. She was in her bathing suit, so she felt even more skeeved out. So she quickly washed her car, and then she was about to leave. And I thought to myself, I've got to drop some dope line on her to get this girl. And so the only thing I had in my arsenal was in my trunk, which was the tire foam that you spray on your tires, and it burns off all the crap. Mm-hmm. So I got it out of my trunk, and I walked up to her, and my pickup line was, "Can I foam your tires?" The face she made of scorn, I will never forget. Because that was possibly the worst pickup line of all time.
Probably.
I now know with her after 25 years of marriage that it worked.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked, and so we started dating. And within a couple of weeks, I found out her father was a personal injury attorney in Miami, Florida. So my 2.9 had nothing to do with the first job I got out of law school, Chris. It was my excellent pickup line of, "Can I foam your tires?" So I started dating her. And then about a year later, I graduated from law school, and I only got one interview. And the one interview was with the father of the girl I had been dating for a year.
Wow. Just what a chance encounter that changed your whole life, professionally, personally. I mean, what a dynamic exchange that turned out to be. I mean, life-altering.
Life-altering. It was well worth the $4 bottle of tire foam.
Well, hey, at least you approach her. You could have just, not and just moved on. But you put yourself in the game.
I'm glad I had a dirty car that day, Chris.
All right. So then when do you open up your practice?
So I practiced with my father-in-law. His name is Robert Rubenstein. He's in Miami. He just recently opened an office in Boston.
I've noticed.
Congratulations. You've probably seen his billboards. So I practiced with him in Miami for about 5 years. And he gave me a dual education, which is just, I'm blessed to have had a dual education. And what I mean by that is he gave me to his trial lawyers to teach me how to be a trial lawyer. And then he took me under his wing and taught me how to run a business.
Mm. Oh, wow.
And talk about getting lucky with mentorship. He took me on his first commercial shoot 2 weeks. He was shooting TV commercials in Miami 2 weeks after I started with him as a lawyer. So I was learning how to do commercials and TV and billboards in 1995, straight out of law school. And he mentored me for the next 5 years. And then I moved up to West Palm Beach. And in the meantime, I had gotten married to his daughter. And then he offered me to be a partner and open up his West Palm Beach office. And that was another pivotal moment for me where I talked to my wife, his daughter, and she said, "Do not do it. Do not be a partner with my dad." I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" She said, "Craig, I know you were married. You probably don't want to be Robert's son-in-law and your success from being Robert's son-in-law the rest of your life. You need to do this on your own because I know you're an entrepreneur." And boy, that's pretty special for your wife to know you so well that she tells you to deny being a partner with her father. And that was 22 years ago. And so I opened up my own thing. And he, to his amazing credit, he blessed it and said, no problem. And in fact, he continues to be my mentor to this day.
I mean, I always say, it's smart guys listen to their wives, because you get counsel that because as guys, I just feel like we lack I feel like a lot of women have a certain perspective. Like, I can go to my wife and she'll give me the best, neutral, objective advice that I'd even consider. And the best part is she's got my back. Like your wife then and now has your back and cares. So you're getting this loving, guidance. Sometimes you hear it, sometimes you don't want to hear it. But how were you ever at a point where you were still gonna partner up with him and not Lister, or it was a foregone conclusion? You just decided, you're right, I'm gonna definitely not.
It's funny because when he made me the offer, I knew that I should not answer right away.
Yeah.
In our legal training, I said, let me think about it. And when I went home, I was surprised at the depth of the analysis that we had and how well my wife at the time knew me so well. But after we talked it all through, it became a foregone conclusion that he would handle that news of my rejection well because of the type of person he was. So he handled it so well. And he said, I want you to be successful because I love you. And he said, whatever choice you make, I'm going to support. And that was pretty special to hear that from your father.
Yeah.
Lovely, lovely man.
Well, that's awesome. That's very cool. So you hung a shingle. Okay. Did you take business with you to that your business? How'd you get going?
So I was at another law firm for a few years in between in West Palm Beach, learning the area, learning the geographical region. And so I had quite a few trials with that law firm and had built up quite a caseload while working at that law firm. So when I decided to leave, I, of course, looked at my case list, studied the bar rules as to how you can ethically make a play for the cases that are yours. So I followed all the ethical rules, and I got lucky in that I had 65 clients that left with me when I left, which was plenty to sustain me for the first year. So I had 70 files and 65 of them left with me.
So how many people at that moment in time did you have working with you? Or were you just a true solo?
One.
One.
So
Okay.
I had a secretary at that other law firm, and I went into her 1 hour before I gave my notice. And I said, Debbie, I'm leaving, and I'd like you to come with me, but you got to keep this secret for the next hour. And I said, Debbie, I'd like you to come with me. I know you have to call your husband. And before I could say husband, she said, I don't need to call my stupid husband. I'm going with you. And that was all I needed. I needed to hear Debbie have confidence in me. And Debbie retired last year.
Wow. That's amazing. So at this point, you have 60 or 70 files. Are you obviously have to hustle because those files will settle. What were some things that you did? Did you start networking? Did you start, what were you doing to acquire more cases at that point?
Well, I remember I didn't have any money other than the money that my father-in-law gave me a loan to go on television. So he was going to help me make a marketing splash very quickly, but I didn't have any staff. And I knew I needed to do what a lawyer would do if he didn't have the blessing of some television ads, which is one-on-one marketing. So the most valuable thing you have when you're one employee with no money is you have your time. That's your biggest asset because you don't have any money. So I quickly devoted myself to two things. And I did this when I was 26 years old. Number one was never eating lunch at your desk or alone. And I think there's a book called Never Eat Alone. And I took that on. And I'm like, I am never going to work through lunch. I am never going to eat at my desk. And I'm never going to eat alone. Every single day, I wanted to have lunch with some existing referral source or a new potential referral source. So I have marketed by lunch. I call it marketing by lunch for 25 years. And I've had hundreds or thousands of lunches. And one-on-one is where I think I do really well because I try to be a nice guy and I like to connect with people. And I'm extroverted in that regard. So I like one-on-one contacts. So the first thing I did was lunches. And the second thing I did is I reserved 2 hours every week. And I did it on Friday between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, where I would not work on a case. I would only work, as they say now, on your business instead of in your business.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that from Robert, my father-in-law. And that was back when I was a lawyer, not a business person. But I had 65 files I had to work on alone. And I said, I'm not going to work on any of those files Friday, between 3 and 5. And I didn't. I didn't work on any of those files. I worked on growing my business and working on my business. So when I'd get a business card from some function I was at, between 3 and 5 was when I'd contact that lawyer and try to set up lunch. Or I'd contact that lawyer on the business card and chat with him and get to know him. So I was deepening a relationship. So I say at my speaking engagements, I say to all young people, if there's 2 things you're going to do that are pretty cheap, one is don't eat at your office and don't skip lunch. And the second is time block a couple hours every week to work on your business instead of in your business.
When did you hire your first lawyer?
I probably hired my first lawyer when I was about only 2 years in, 2 years as a solo practitioner. And I was lucky enough to do that because I knew right away I didn't want to be a trial lawyer for the rest of my career. My path, I had already set the path earlier through my father-in-law's vision, which is that I wanted to be like him. And he has never handled a case. He was a tax attorney in Miami and never handled a PI case and has still never been to court. Now, a lot of trial lawyers, that's offensive to them because their ego is wrapped up in their trial skills. To me, I need not judge why a person is able to help hundreds or thousands of PI clients like my father-in-law just because he was never a trial lawyer. That doesn't matter to me at all. He services 20 times as many clients as anyone who wears the badge of honor of being a trial lawyer. So with equal skill. It's just that he doesn't do it himself. And I'm the same way. I did used to be a trial lawyer for 10 years, but I realized I could service and help more people by not being a trial lawyer.
So when you put your flag in the ground and you hung your shingle, you were in, but that's a scary, fraught time. You're obviously at a much different situation, a much different level. When did you feel like you were established enough that you weren't going to fail, that you were established?
Honestly, a really pivotal point in my growth as an entrepreneur was when I hired my first person that you could call an office manager. So at that size, we still called it an office manager. And when I speak, I get asked the question very often, when did you hire your first non-legal person? Non-legal. And the answer is 6 employees. And it's when I hired an office manager. And that sounds early on to a lot of people. And let me do everything I can to dissuade you of the fact or the opinion that that's too early to hire a office manager. Because if you realize the basic thing like handling a phone call when your secretary is going to be late to work, that takes you out of your brain space for 10 minutes, just saying, hey boss, I'm going to be late. What if you had someone just who could handle that call? Or, can I put my vacation on your count? Like an employee saying, I need to go on vacation. It takes you 5 or 10 minutes to get out of what you're doing, just to okay the vacation, to get it on your calendar, etc. And you multiply that by only 6 employees, just 6. And you're wasting 2-3 hours a day. 2-3 hours a day. So why would you not hire someone to handle all that basic garbage when you're as small as 5 or 6 employees?
So when John Morgan was on the Earley Show, he talked about ruthless delegation. He's talking about that a lot. Were you from the jump ruthlessly delegating, or did it take time for you to get there?
It took time because what those who are able to delegate and those who are able to not delegate don't realize is that delegation is all about the psychology of control, and our failure to delegate is all based on fear. Only I can do it best is the first story we tell ourselves. The next is they're going to screw it up. And then there's everything in between. Only I can do it best and they're going to screw it up. And also giving a lot of meaning to failure. So if it does get screwed up, what does that mean about me? What does that mean about the person? There's so much depth of psychology involving delegation and the concept that people are unaware of. It causes more fear than depositions. It causes more fear than trials, because you really imagine yourself really failing if you delegate and something gets screwed up. That's a more common fear and more often during the day than losing a trial or doing shitty at a deposition. It's the fear of giving something up and the lack of control that is the key to delegating, is overcoming that fear. And there are some podcasts about delegation that I've listened to. I talk at my seminar. I think Ari Meisel, is one of the speakers. It's the Do Nothing podcast, I think is what it's called. And he has an episode on the levels of delegation. And he is fantastic. So he talks about the complexity and the different levels of delegation and all the psychology involved at each level. And I listened to that a long time ago, realizing that was a very good summary of the fear of different levels of delegating tasks. And I've gotten to a point in my career now where the fear still occurs. But what you do with that fear and how you overcome it allows you to grow your business or prevents you from growing your business. So ruthless delegation is not only ruthless to the people you're delegating to, it's ruthless with yourself.
Yeah, I hope people are taking notes because it's a psychological barrier, and lawyers especially are control freaks. So you're talking to an audience who is just notoriously, holding everything tight to the vest. Your level of delegation correlates to your level of scale of growing out your business, right? So the more you delegate, the more your business will grow, right? Even if you're not self-employed, even if if you work for someone, your success as a trial lawyer will be dependent upon your ability to delegate to others. You must give work to other people. My mantra, Craig, is if someone can do it 75% as well as I can do it, I'm going to delegate it. I don't care. Maybe if it's 65%, right? It doesn't have to be precise, but get it off your desk. I would encourage all the lawyers listening to this right now, look at your desk and get something off it today. And you will become very well habituated to the benefits of delegation, right? Because you can't scale, you can't grow. No matter what you're doing, you can't scale without delegation. I would encourage everyone to get an executive assistant. That is a game changer. You shouldn't be dealing with PTO. You shouldn't be going to the post office. You shouldn't be doing stuff that doesn't move the needle, right? A really good book I just read was Buy Back Your Time. I think his name is Greg Martel.
I just looked it up. It's called Ari Meisel is the name of the author. And it's called The 6 Levels of Delegation. And he talks about, as I said, all the psychology involved in the 6 levels of delegation and how each one is more complex than the other and how to overcome each one. So I point people to that as like a baseline learning about delegation, the psychology of delegation. And I still struggle with it. Of course I do. I'm a control freak. You can't stop yourself from being a control freak, but you've got to realize the impact on your business and on your life of holding on to stuff. And you still, in one of the groups I'm in called Atticus, they talk about you've got to take off your hero cape. We all have a self-imposed cape as if we were a superhero. And the only way you can succeed and grow and scale is by forcefully removing the cape from your back. We want to be the person in our office who everybody goes to get their answer. Mm-hmm. We want to be that important. Mm-hmm. And it's because our identity is based on being the problem solver, because we're lawyers and that's what we do. But what if your door was open all day and nobody came in? How would you feel about that? Well, I will tell you, my door is open all day here at my office, Chris. Nobody comes in. Mm-hmm. I don't have a line at my door. Nobody needs my answers because I've empowered my staff and my department heads and my leaders to have all the answers. I guide them, but I don't guide them by my door being open ever.
See, that's where a lot of lawyers, they get it wrong. And they, I read another good book suggestion is How to Be a Great Boss. I think it was Gino Wickman. And he talks about don't take the monkey. This is almost like a reverse delegation concept where people try to delegate to you. Your staff tries to delegate work to you. I tell my staff all the time, don't take the monkey, right? I don't have a line at my door either, Craig. And my door is pretty much always open. There shouldn't be people coming in. Hey, do you have 5 minutes? Hey, what do you think about this? You need to challenge people. You need to force them to do it on their own. Okay. And if they can't figure it out, there needs to be someone on the bus who they can go to. And then ultimately, if there's no answer that it could be found, then it's you. But then you shouldn't be asked that question or that thing again. So I want to encourage everyone, don't take the monkey. Traction. I think that's probably my favorite business book. Talks about letting go of the vine, letting go of psychological control. This grip a lot of lawyers have on things. Let go of the vine and be uncomfortable. Get used to being, my wife and I always talk about, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable as an entrepreneur. And that's just that's the ante to play the game here. You must, right?
It's hard. And what people don't realize is that you've got to be self-aware in order to be aware of your discomfort or be aware that your identity is wrapped up in being the guy with all the answers. And it's tough to admit to, like, someone asked me the other day, what web company do you use to do your website? And I was proud and delighted and perplexed by the answer I gave, which was, I have no idea. I actually don't know who does my website.
That's great.
And I was
Good.
like, really weird that as a business owner, I don't know. But then on the other hand, I looked at it with a positive mindset and went, God, I must have some really smart people working for me in marketing because I don't have a clue who does our website. They got
I love it.
So when I go
Frankly, you shouldn't.
all these vendors, great vendors of all sorts, and they're like, well, who does your current website? And I'm like, I don't know.
Well, that's good. That's a good thing.
I don't know how many cases my website gets me, which I should know. But the name of the company, I'm sorry, I have no idea.
Yeah. Oh no, I hear it. That's truly running the business. So so you started off, you eventually hired your lawyer. How many lawyers do you have now on the bus?
I think 11 or 12, and we're hiring 3 more.
3 more. Okay. So how many total staff do you have today?
Above 75.
Okay. So this is a example of an attorney who got into the business, right? You learned, you dedicated time, you put aside time on a Friday, you started delegating, and this delegation compounded, and now you have 80 people, right? So that is a lesson to all these attorneys listening to this, that you have to let go of things. You have to delegate, or else you're gonna go crazy. So we talk about resilience. My friend Ryan McKean, I know you know Ryan. He was on the show, I want to say 2 weeks ago. He called he called it resilience muscle, right? That we sort of like have to keep working out these muscles. Can you think of a couple times in your career, right? I know obviously, recently Florida legislative changes, I'm sure, were just super stressful, right?
Yes.
Are there a couple moments during your career so far that really made you, that really tested your resilience? You had to be very strong, stronger than you usually needed to be.
Well, I think it's actually, Chris, wrapped around some of the concepts we were talking about. So for me, many of them were surrounding my personal life and my work-life balance. So, I had 2 daughters. My wife stayed home after a career in journalism, and it's so hard as a serial entrepreneur, which is what I am, to balance your identity and go from serial entrepreneur to going home where your father, or your role as father, or your role as husband. Because what if your identity is wrapped up too much in I'm a lawyer?
Right.
Then there's a disconnect. You have to turn that off and then give value and meaning in your life to I'm a father or I'm a husband. So one of the things I studied in mindfulness and meditation, and one of the questions that was asked of me, is if someone says, tell me about yourself, do you say I'm a husband? Do you say I'm a father? Or do you say I'm a lawyer? How do you answer that question? And the first time I was asked that question, I was always, I'm a lawyer, or I'm an entrepreneur, or I run a law firm. But I was forced 20 years ago to really think about what pops into your head when you answer that question. When someone says, just tell me about yourself. And that's the beginning of a journey of figuring out, can that answer change in different situations? Should it change? Can it be consistent across your life? Should it be consistent across your life? How do you answer that question? So what is my role in this world is a very broad and very deep question. So now if I'm asked that question, I realize the importance of how you define yourself. And my wife will be talking about this concept at my seminar in Boston in April, which is how your identity gets wrapped up the more success you have. And you have an ROI at work. You get all this great feedback because there's KPIs at work. You can look and go, I made this amount of money and I settled this amount of cases. You've got clear, objective KPIs at work. It's much more challenging at home to have KPIs. What are your domestic KPIs? And if you view your home life and you come up with KPIs, as a lawyer, it's actually rewarding.
100%.
So at home, now that I have a weekly meeting with my wife every Saturday at 11, and we go over what we could consider our weekly KPIs, which is how connected we are. Did we succeed in date night? Did I call both my daughters this week? They're adults now. And one of our KPIs is we must connect with each of our daughters. I have to do it, not have to do it. I've chosen to do it at a certain time each week. And it's a domestic KPI. Now, it sounds cold, but if that's where your brain goes, because all we do is KPIs and numbers all day, What if you held yourself to the same standards in a domestic setting, and you strove for excellence in your domestic setting just as much as you did at work? Wouldn't that be an interesting game to play?
100%. So I wrote about this on LinkedIn recently. I have really one domestic KPI, and that is I'm home by 5 o'clock. That's success to me. And so we just got into the concept of delegation. I feel like you were just talking about comes down to time management, right? Because I can't get home by 5 if I'm not managing my time. Time management and delegation are interrelated inexorably. They're tied together. So I encourage all the lawyers on the call. You have to delegate. You have to manage your time. I speak to bar associations. This is my most popular topic is time management because Craig, as you know, lawyers butcher time management. They just get derailed by email. And I'm not, and I've learned, I've learned my lesson. So I'm not some, new jack on the block, right? I had to study this, but when you study this stuff, like you're talking about, like you are a student of this. I'm a student. You're talking about 6 levels of delegation. That's like high level delegation, academic, principles that we need to know about. Manage your time well, right? Because I'll tell you, I'll be open and honest. I had a kind of a tough day at the office, and I said to myself, when I walk in to my home, I'm not going to let anyone know. They don't need to know. It's not their business. It's not their problem. Dad, I'm a father, I'm a husband. They shouldn't need to know that Chris or Dad, had a tough day. So be mindful of how you are when you walk in the house, right? Because you got to take that lawyer hat off at some point. When you're at the office, work and delegate and manage your time well so that you can get home by 5 o'clock. I believe that's very possible. My firm is the size of yours. I have 15 people, but I'm not going to be working weekends or after 5, Craig, because I'm on the weekdays because the work gets done. And it's sadly a lot of lawyers take on too much in the day, and they take the monkey and all these things. But I think these things can, with a little bit of finesse, be improved. But that's my KPI: home by 5 and leave at the door. Don't put on my. I don't want to put on my family.
It's a great KPI, and in transparency, I'm never home by 5. And it's a problem, and it's been a problem throughout my life, which is that I'm not home by 5. I do all the time blocking methods, and then I give the excuse, which my wife says is bullshit, which is, I'm too busy to get home by 5. But she knows that it's BS, and that if you structured your life in order to get home by 5, if it was that important to you, then you would. It's that important to Chris Earley. Obviously, I haven't made enough of a priority to get home by 5 for whatever reasons, and those are reasons for me to tackle. And I took a wonderful life coaching course called Landmark, and Landmark Education, probably the best course I've ever taken in life coaching. And we were talking about the concept of priority, and when you say, I can't do this because of whatever. And they said, it was the 3-day course, and they insist that you get back from your breaks on time. So you've got 100 people taking this course, 120 people, of various walks of life. And, half those people are chronically late for appointments, right? Half of the world is chronically late for appointments. So they said, we're locking the doors 1 minute past when break is done. And then you have to wait 2 hours and you're not going to get in. And they said, no, we mean it. We're serious about that. And everyone's like, that's impossible. You can't do that. So they said, well, what if? What if we said that if you get back on time from every break for the next 3 days, we'll give you each $1 million. What systems would you set up in order to make sure that you were back every break with a couple of minutes to spare? When it was a dinner break, lunch break, bathroom break, whatever. Who thinks they could do it? And everybody in the room raised their hand. It said, unless I die or, unless I get in an accident, I can be back. If you really were going to give me $1 million. So the point of that story in Landmark was, it's not that you can't get back by 5 o'clock. It's not that you can't get home by 5 o'clock. It's that it hasn't raised to a level of priority for whatever reason that getting there at 5 o'clock is worth $1 million to you. So I love that allegory at Landmark, and everybody made it back because they said that's what we're going to hold you accountable for the next 3 days. And if you do show up late, you're not going to get in. You're going to be bored outside the door for 2 hours. And just pretend it's like $1 million, and it's life and death. What if we said you're going to die? We're going to shoot you. We're going to execute you if you get back at 5:01. Well, that means that you'd put a priority on it. So all of our reasons why we can't get home by 5 are bullshit. Because if I told you I would give you $1 million, or I was going to kill you if you didn't, we would all find a way to get home by 5.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you want it enough, you're going to do it. And just a little, background. I wake up at 4 o'clock and I meditate. I want to talk about meditation in a second with you. So, I get centered early, but I get to my desk. I live an hour from Boston. I get to my desk at 6:15. If you're a morning person, that to me is like when the magic happens professionally. I am just like locked in. There's no one in the office. High level activities get done at that point. That ties in again, time management and delegation. So I'm not handling the busy work. I'm doing the productive work. But again, I agree with you, right? If you want something bad enough, if you want to lose weight, if you want to run a marathon, if you really want it bad enough, you're going to do the work, right? That ties into entrepreneurship. If you really want to build a special offer, because it takes so much. I know you know this. I don't have to tell you. The entrepreneurs listen to this show know that it's so freaking hard. There are days, Craig, where I say to my wife, I'm going to burn it down. Like, I am done. I'm just tired of this crap. And we all go through that, right? But you have to weather on. But again, you can be home by 5, right? I mean, shorten the lunch, shorten the email. It's totally doable. We had dinner, you and I, in Atlanta. I want to say in the spring, following John Fisher's Mastermind Experience, which I'm a huge aficionado of. I encourage everyone, check out John Fisher's Mastermind Experience. You and I had dinner at a nice restaurant, and we had a deep discussion. Most important to me was it was about parenthood. Ancillary to that, sort of beneath that, was the business, right? But the business we got into, and you called it almost like a gamification. It's not about chasing dough and money and prizes. It's about gamification. It's about, building your practice. It's about building a better practice. I know you're a culture nut, for lack of a better word. I know I'm a culture nut, and you have to be. And that's where a lot of lawyers get that wrong. Can you just speak to how you approach the gamification, how it's not about money, it's about something bigger and more important than that?
Well, we gamify a lot in our office, and the basic concept of gamification is basically that you can try to make everything fun. And you can make KPIs fun, you can make culture fun, and people innately don't mind competing as long as it's presented in a positive atmosphere. And gamifying is whether you're competing against yourself or competing against someone else or competing against each other to win something. And even those people who aren't competitive, winning is defined in a different way. So, it was easy with me and John Fisher. John Fisher challenged me 3 years ago, first law firm to get to 300 Google reviews. And he put up a sign in his office in New York, beat Goldenfarb. Because he wanted to empower his ultra competitive staff.
Love it.
They wanted to get to 300 reviews first. And I wasn't about to have this med mal lawyer from New York with only 10 staff take on my behemoth of a law firm and win that. So I was an athlete. I still am an athlete. I'm super competitive. So there was no way I was going to lose that. There was no way. So I got all hands on deck, and I was going to beat him, and we did. I had like 3 times the staff he did to get Google reviews, and 3 times the resources, and we beat him, but barely. He put such a great effort. It was all over social media. I'm going to beat Goldenfarb. We barely beat him. We still talk to this day about the great epic battle of Fisher versus Goldenfarb and getting to 300 Google reviews. But that's an idea where you can challenge even another law firm.
Yeah.
And you can gamify pretty much anything within your law firm, within your family. But if you set it up as a game, all of a sudden it becomes fun. And we gamify a lot, both in my household and my office. And, you can gamify any KPI. You can gamify anything. And the cool part is it involves creativity, which law firms never have any creativity at all. We're all so boring. But, we bought all these whiteboards, like, that Google has at their headquarters, and we bought different colored markers. And as boring as we all are as staff and lawyers, if you buy different colored markers and you buy whiteboards at Office Depot or Amazon, and you actually color, and you put your games and your metrics on a whiteboard where you actually draw, you'll be surprised that you have a creative person in your office who will actually love to do that. And so we had 11 whiteboards going at the same time with different KPIs, where people were challenged to hit different KPIs. It was so much fun. Now we've transferred, over my objection, we've transferred those boards to digital, where it's digitally displayed. Over my objection, I didn't want to do it because I think the smell of markers and the fun of markers is much more fun than a computer screen up on the wall. But I was overruled by my tech department. And so now we have 11 boards up in our office that are all digital, showing our metrics. But that was an early example of gamifying. And a good book to read on gamifying is called The Four Disciplines of Execution. It was one of the books that first talked about scoreboarding, and the power of scoreboarding, visual scoreboards to show your different metrics, and the power that scoreboarding has over people psychologically. A fantastic book.
It was some use the word titan again. It was some automobile titan in the early 20th century. I think it was Ford who would write down on the production floor the production numbers of the day staff. He wanted the night staff to come in and say, "Ooh, okay, we got that. We'll beat that."
That's great.
People can be very competitive. Just want ask you about meditation. Meditation for me has been very transformative. My marriage has improved. My business has improved. When did you start meditating?
Probably about 10 years ago. I started having some more free-floating anxiety, like probably 90% of lawyers have some sort of anxiety disorder.
You and me both, yeah.
And I realized that it was very difficult for me to quiet my mind at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I read a book by Dan Harris, who wrote 10% Happier.
Awesome book.
Fantastic book. And at that point, I'd already been dabbling with some meditation, and then I realized that there were some apps that you could use, whether it's Calm or Breathe, or there's so many apps now that I love, Headspace. And then the 10% Happier app by Dan Harris is also great. Sam Harris's app, Awake. So I have a whole little mini screen on my phone with different meditation apps. And, over time, I realized that this was something that was really helping me. Every morning that I do a certain amount of time, there's a great study done by the military of the United States that studied actually the maximum amount or the ideal amount to meditate. And they did it with all their Navy SEALs, because that's the way part of the Navy SEAL training involves mindfulness. And believe it or not, they came out with 12 minutes. 12 minutes was something where it's some return after that, but that's the optimal time. And in the field, you often don't have that long to meditate when you're in a battle. So they actually studied brainwaves to see what's a good amount of time. Now, less than 12 minutes, not so great. Meditation for an hour, great, no problem. But there was actually a scientific study on 12 minutes. So I tend to meditate for 15 to 20 minutes every morning with one of the apps. And if you notice the apps, a lot of them have 15 or 20 minute meditations. There's a reason. It's because that's been determined to be about the right amount of time to get some value out of it. And there's so many apps that can be used. And so I use many of them. That's why I do it. And I went as far as to go to a retreat in Western Massachusetts, near you, a couple hours outside of Boston, where I had an opportunity to do a 5-day retreat for 5 days, silent meditation retreat, out in a converted convent. So that was quite an experience.
That's what I want to probably get to at some point. I meditate for 20 minutes each morning, but that would be the next step. Let me ask you, the Seven-Figure Attorney Summit is coming to Boston next April. I've been to it, but could you just tell the audience what they can expect and how do they sign up for it?
Yeah, so what's interesting about that particular event is once a year I back-to-back it with John Fisher's mastermind. So what we do is we pick one hotel, and I have my Seven-Figure Attorney seminar, which is only one day. And John Fisher has his mastermind, which is only one day. And we know a lot of people don't want to fly across the country for a one-day seminar. So several years ago, we decided, hey, let's make it a 2-day seminar. Day 1 is me. Day 2 is you. Let's do it at the same hotel. So we did that. And so April 11th, I believe, is a Thursday. And April 12th, I believe, is a Friday. So we're doing April 11th and April 12th at, I believe it's a Hyatt Regency in Boston. And my website is sevenfigureattorney.com. And his website is themastermindexperience.com, I believe. And you have to sign up for both separately. But they're very different structures of seminars. And they both have tremendous feedback. And it's really cool to go to 2 different seminars in the hotel, same hotel, back to back. And it makes it worth your money flying across the country because you get 2 different experiences with 2 different seminars. So Seven-Figure Attorney, April 11th, and then Mastermind Experience, April 12th. Go to both the websites and sign up. And I've been doing that back to back with John for several years now. It's been a great success.
Yeah, for me, it's a no-brainer. I highly recommend both seminars. Both days are just high value. There's just great value in getting on an airplane if you need to, and just getting away from your business and thinking deeply. It's just incredibly impactful. Just wrapping up here, what book has had the most profound impact on your life?
That's so hard to answer, but I will go with, I got to go with 2. I can't just answer one. One is Traction.
Yes.
Gino Wickman. And I run my law firm based on the EOS system, Entrepreneurial Operating System, which Gino Wickman wrote about in his book. And many law firms are now adopting this system to run your law office. So that's number one, and that has formed the organizational backbone of my law firm for many, many years. And the second is a book on leadership called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And that book, I think it's Patrick Lencioni. And we learned all our leadership principles here based on that book. But we learned all the theories of trust, delegation, and all of the leadership skills you need in order to build a large organization or to even grow or scale at all are in that book. And then we hired a person from Atticus, one of the coaching groups I'm involved in, who is 5 Dysfunctions certified.
Oh, wow.
To come and lead a retreat, a 2-day retreat for our leaders in our law firm based on the theories in the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So those 2 books have just been instrumental in helping me understand myself, become a leader, and grow my law firm.
5 Dysfunctions of a Team is one of the best books I've ever read. I give it to all of my new team members. I want them to read it because it's all about team. When you and I had dinner in Atlanta, you recommended a book, Strong Father, Strong Daughter, and of course I read it. Any advice for me? I'll be entering the teenage years in a few years. I have a boy and a girl. I know the teenage years are legit, right? Any words of wisdom you can impart to me in the audience?
Yeah, your daughters will still love you, Chris. If you have daughters and they go through the fire-breathing dragon stage of age 11 to age 19, just remember that those dragons still love you, and they'll come back to you when they turn 21 and they start having to pay rent, and they realize that you're not such an idiot. But it's a 10-year fire-breathing dragon stage that we all have to go through with girls, and sometimes boys, but more so with girls. Reading that book, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, really teaches you what girls need when they're most evil. When they're most evil during that 10-year time period, they're still humans, even though they appear as evil beasts. They still have needs, and it's really important for you to be able to look past the fire and to realize that these are the most important formative years of a young woman's life, between 11 and 21. And if you screw it up as a dad, you can screw it up real bad. You can end up with a daughter that's going to be depressed and unhappy and be looking for something that you never gave her or that you may have been able to prevent. And that's pretty powerful to realize that you have such an impact on a little human for those 10 years when they're trying their hardest to make sure that you don't have a relationship with them. So it's a real battle, and it was a real battle for me, and it's a real battle for every dad. But reading that book was very helpful to figure out what my little fire-breathing dragons wanted.
I love that book. Final question. What's your greatest success in life so far?
My greatest success is really striving every day to build a place where everybody wants to come to work. My employees spend more time with me or at my law office by far than they do at home, not including sleep.
Yeah.
Think about that there's like 11 hours a day, maybe 10 hours a day, where a certain number of human beings are giving to you their time and their attention to you. Yet they go home and they have maybe 2 hours a night where they're giving time or attention to their family. Yet they're giving 10 hours to you. If that doesn't impact you to make your workplace something that's at least bearable for them, then your priority is a little screwed up. And to me, I want to do everything I can to make sure that these people look at work as a respite or as a place of peace, to go to work every day. And that is my greatest success, is that I think I've done a pretty good job at that.
Awesome. Yeah, Ryan McKean, I mentioned him. He was on the podcast, and then he said he sets up a business for people. He'd want to work at that business. That's the way he sets it up, right? And that to me is very, very influential. I really appreciate it, Craig. Thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you?
Come to my seminar is the first. As far as getting in touch with me, call my office. I'm at 1-800-GOLDLAW is the amazing phone number I was able to purchase. And then choose the twos is my slogan, because I have 6 area codes where I bought 222-2222. So choose the twos, baby.
Appreciate it. All right, Craig, thank you so much. Well, that's it for this episode of The Earley Show. Be sure to check out more episodes of our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel.